The vast expanse of the Galactic Alliance stretched across 17 star systems, each home to civilizations that had long ago mastered the art of interstellar warfare. In this cosmic theater, speed was everything. The faster your ships could accelerate, the quicker they could deliver devastating firepower, the greater your standing among the allied races. It was a simple equation that had governed military doctrine for over 3 centuries. The Velocer dominated the speed rankings with their needle-shaped cruisers that could reach .8 light speed in mere seconds. Their sleek vessels cut through space like silver daggers, leaving trails of azure plasma in their wake. The Trebian followed close behind with their biomechanical hybrids that pulsed with organic energy, capable of near-instantaneous directional changes that defied conventional physics. Even the crystalline Xylaren, despite their massive geometric battleships, had mastered gravity manipulation to achieve impressive acceleration rates. Then there was Earth's contribution to the Alliance fleet, the HSS Galahad. At first glance, the Galahad appeared to be a relic from humanity's early spacefaring days. Where other Alliance vessels gleamed with polished metal or shimmered with energy fields, the human warship looked almost mundane. Its hull was a dull gray composite scarred from countless asteroid impacts and solar radiation exposure. The ship's design followed practical human engineering principles, rather than the elegant aesthetics favored by other races. It was blocky, asymmetrical, and undeniably slow. Captain Elias Grant stood on the bridge of his vessel, watching through the main viewport as a formation of Velocer interceptors performed their daily maneuvers. The alien ships moved like schools of luminescent fish, weaving between asteroids in perfect synchronization at speeds that would have liquefied human crew members without proper inertial dampening. It was a beautiful display of technological superiority, and Grant knew that every species in the Alliance viewed it with a mixture of admiration and envy. "Sir," came the voice of Lieutenant Maris Okafor from the tactical station. "The Velocer squadron is requesting a response to their challenge for combat drills." Grant smiled grimly. Another day, another invitation to public humiliation. The daily exercises had become something of a spectacle among the Alliance fleet. Ships would line up to test their speed and agility against the fastest vessels, while the Galahad invariably brought up the rear, struggling to keep pace with even the supply ships. "Tell them we'll participate," Grant replied, settling into his command chair. "Standard engagement protocols." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They had endured months of barely concealed laughter from their Alliance counterparts. The communications channels frequently crackled with jokes about the turtle ship and its sleeping crew. Some of the more diplomatic species simply ignored the human vessel altogether, as if its presence were an embarrassment to the Alliance's reputation. "Weapons systems online," reported Weapons Officer Banks, his voice steady despite the tension. "Though at our current speed, we'll be lucky to get within firing range before the exercise ends." "Engines showing normal parameters," added Chief Engineer Rahul Torres from the engineering station. "Still maintaining our impressive maximum velocity of .2 light speed." The sarcasm in Torres's voice was unmistakable. Every member of the crew was acutely aware that their ship's top speed was barely a quarter of what the slowest Alliance vessel could achieve. It was a source of constant frustration, made worse by the fact that Earth's military leaders continued to insist that the Galahad represented humanity's finest contribution to interstellar defense. "Beginning exercise in 30 seconds, announced the Velocer squadron leader over the general communication channel. "Today's scenario involves pursuit and interception. The human vessel will attempt to reach navigation point Alpha, while the rest of us demonstrate proper tactical response." Grant could hear the barely suppressed amusement in the alien commander's voice. The Velocer had turned these exercises into elaborate demonstrations of human inadequacy, always designing scenarios that highlighted the Galahad's obvious weaknesses. "All stations prepare for exercise commencement," Grant ordered. "Helm set course for navigation point Alpha. Best possible speed." The Galahad began its ponderous acceleration, slowly building momentum, like a massive freight train. Around them, The other Alliance vessels surged forward with graceful efficiency, their advanced propulsion systems propelling them toward the target coordinates at velocities that made the human ship appear nearly stationary by comparison. Within minutes, the inevitable occurred. A pair of Velosar interceptors swept in from opposite directions, their weapon systems locked onto the Galahad's position. The exercise called for non-lethal engagement, but the psychological impact was unmistakable. The human ship had been outmaneuvered before it could travel even a fraction of the required distance. "We're being targeted from multiple vectors," Okafor reported with professional detachment. "Velocr ships achieving firing solutions." Defensive maneuvers. Grant ordered, knowing the futility of the command. The Galahad's turning radius was measured in kilometers rather than meters. Any evasive action would be too slow to avoid even simulated weapons fire. The exercise concluded with predictable results. The Galahad had managed to cover perhaps 10% of the distance to the target before being destroyed by the pursuing forces. The post-exercise analysis would undoubtedly focus on the human vessel's learning opportunities and areas for improvement, diplomatic language for what everyone already knew: Earth had sent a dinosaur to compete in a race against thoroughbreds. As the fleet formed up for the return journey to the main Alliance station, Grant made his way to his private quarters. The constant weight of expectation and disappointment had worn on him over the past months, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he would reveal to his senior staff the true reason why the Galahad had been assigned to the Alliance fleet, and why their apparent weaknesses might actually represent humanity's greatest strength. 2 hours later, Grant's senior officers assembled in the ship's main briefing room. The space was functional rather than impressive, equipped with basic holographic displays and standard Alliance communication equipment. Unlike the elaborately designed conference facilities aboard other Alliance vessels, the human briefing room emphasized practicality over aesthetics. Lieutenant Okafor arrived first, her tactical files already loaded on her personal datapad. She had served aboard 3 different Earth vessels before the Galahad, and her experience with conventional space combat made her particularly frustrated with their current assignment. Chief Engineer Torres followed still, wearing his maintenance uniform and carrying a cup of coffee that had been synthesized from algae grown in the ship's biological recycling systems. Weapons Officer Banks entered with Science Officer Mira Lee, both carrying expressions of curiosity mixed with resignation. They had grown accustomed to post-exercise briefings that focused on damage control and morale maintenance rather than actual strategic planning. "Thank you all for coming." Grant began activating the room's privacy shields to prevent electronic surveillance from the Alliance monitoring systems. "I know the past few months have been difficult. Our performance in the exercises has been less than impressive." "That's one way to put it," Torres muttered, taking a sip of his coffee. "The Velocr have started taking bets on how quickly they can disable us in each scenario." "I understand your frustration," Grant continued. "But I need you to know that our apparent weaknesses are not accidental. The Galahad was not designed to compete with Alliance vessels in traditional speed and agility metrics. We were built for something entirely different." He activated the briefing room's main holographic display, showing a detailed schematic of the Galahad's internal systems. The image revealed components that none of the crew had seen before, hidden sections of the ship that appeared to house technologies unlike anything in the standard Earth fleet. "What you're looking at is the reason why Earth agreed to join the Alliance military cooperation program," Grant explained. "The Galahad is not just a warship. It's a mobile testing platform for experimental technologies that could revolutionize space combat." Lee leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her disappointment with recent events. "What kind of technologies? These schematics show power systems I don't recognize." "3 primary innovations," Grant replied, manipulating the holographic display to highlight different sections of the ship. "First, an experimental gravitational anchor system that can lock our position relative to local space-time. Second, quantum entanglement torpedoes that maintain targeting coherence regardless of distance or interference. And third, he paused dramatically, a reality core that can manipulate the fundamental physics of space-time within a limited radius. The briefing room fell silent as the implications of Grant's revelation sank in. Torres set down his coffee cup with a trembling hand, while Banks stared at the weapon system schematics with growing comprehension. "Are you telling us," Okafor said slowly, "that we've been pretending to be incompetent while carrying some of the most advanced technology in known space?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Grant confirmed. Earth's military strategists determined that the best way to test these systems would be under actual combat conditions, but without revealing their existence to potential enemies. The Alliance exercises have provided perfect cover for field testing while maintaining operational security. "But why the secrecy?" Lee asked. "If these technologies work as designed, they could give the Alliance a tremendous advantage against external threats." Grant's expression grew serious. "Because we're not entirely certain that all Alliance members can be trusted with this level of technological advancement. Intelligence reports suggest that some species maintain communication with entities outside our borders. Until we can verify the loyalty of all Alliance partners, Earth has decided to maintain operational security." He changed the display to show a star map of the local sector, highlighting a particular system on the outer rim of Alliance territory. "Which brings us to our current mission. Long-range sensors have detected unusual activity in the Haven 9 system. The mining station there has reported equipment failures and communication disruptions that don't match any known natural phenomena. Haven 9 is a tritium extraction facility," Torres noted, consulting his engineering database. "They process raw materials for fusion reactor cores used throughout the Alliance. If something happens to that station, it could affect power generation for dozens of worlds." "Exactly," Grant agreed. "Intelligence analysis suggests that the disruptions may be the result of hostile action by an unknown force. The Alliance Council has authorized the Galahad to investigate and, if necessary, defend the Haven 9 facility." Banks studied the tactical implications displayed on his personal screen. "Sir, if we're facing actual combat rather than exercises, what are our orders regarding the experimental systems?" "We are authorized to use any and all capabilities necessary to complete the mission," Grant replied. "This will be the first real-world test of our hidden technologies, and potentially the first time that Alliance forces see what Earth vessels are truly capable of achieving." The mood in the briefing room shifted from resignation to anticipation. For months, the crew had endured the humiliation of appearing inferior to their Alliance counterparts. The prospect of finally demonstrating their true capabilities brought a sense of purpose that had been missing since their assignment to the fleet. "How long until we reach Haven 9? Okafor asked, already beginning to formulate tactical scenarios. 18 hours at maximum sustainable velocity, Grant replied. I want all departments to use that time for final systems checks and crew preparation. This mission will test not only our technology, but our ability to operate under combat conditions while maintaining operational security. What about the other Alliance vessels? Lee inquired. Will they be providing support? Grant's smile was enigmatic. The Alliance Council has decided that this mission falls within Earth's operational jurisdiction. We'll be proceeding alone, which gives us the freedom to operate without external observation. As the senior staff dispersed to prepare their departments, Grant remained in the briefing room, studying the star charts and intelligence reports that detailed the situation at Haven 9. The mining station had been operating normally for over 2 years, extracting tritium from the gas giant's upper atmosphere using established Alliance technology. The recent disruptions had begun gradually, with minor equipment malfunctions and communication delays that could be attributed to solar interference or mechanical wear. However, the pattern of failures suggested something more systematic. Power fluctuations occurred at regular intervals, communication blackouts lasted for precisely calculated durations, and the station's automated defense systems had registered multiple false alarms that corresponded to no detectable threats. It was as if something was probing the facility's capabilities, testing its responses, and mapping its weaknesses. Grant had reviewed similar intelligence reports from his previous assignments in Earth's Deep Space Reconnaissance Program. The methodical nature of the disruptions matched the behavior patterns of species that specialized in technological infiltration and systematic warfare. If hostile forces were indeed targeting Haven 9, they would likely possess capabilities that exceeded anything the Alliance had previously encountered. The next 18 hours passed with unusual efficiency aboard the Galahad. The crew's revelation about their ship's true purpose had transformed the atmosphere from resignation to focused determination. Engineering teams ran comprehensive diagnostics on systems that had been dormant since the ship's launch, while tactical specialists developed engagement protocols for weapons that existed only in classified technical manuals. Torres spent most of his time in the ship's deepest sections, working with the reality core that formed the heart of their experimental arsenal. The device itself was deceptively simple in appearance, resembling a metallic sphere surrounded by complex gravitational field generators and quantum stabilization equipment. According to the technical documentation, the core could alter the fundamental properties of spacetime within a radius of several hundred kilometers, effectively changing the rules of physics that governed movement energy transfer and matter interaction. "The theory is sound," Torres reported to Grant during a brief inspection tour. "We can create localized fields where velocity becomes irrelevant, where energy weapons lose coherence, where even gravity follows different rules. The challenge is controlling the effects precisely enough to affect enemies without damaging ourselves." "What are the risks?" Grant asked, studying the complex control interfaces that surrounded the core. "Catastrophic failure could create a space-time anomaly that would destroy everything within several light-years," Torres replied matter-of-factly. "But the probability calculations suggest that's extremely unlikely, assuming we follow proper activation protocols." Grant nodded, making a mental note to review those protocols personally before any combat deployment. The power to manipulate reality itself was not something to be used lightly, regardless of the potential tactical advantages. Meanwhile, Banks had been familiarizing himself with the quantum entanglement torpedo systems. Unlike conventional weapons that relied on kinetic energy or explosive warheads, these devices created a quantum link between the launcher and target that remained stable, regardless of distance or interference. Once fired, the torpedoes would track their designated targets through spacetime itself, making evasion theoretically impossible. "The ammunition supply is limited," Banks reported during his briefing with Grant. "We carry exactly 12 torpedoes, and Earth hasn't established any resupply protocols for the experimental systems. Whatever we face at Haven 9, we'll need to make every shot count." Lee had been analyzing the sensor data from Haven 9, looking for patterns that might reveal the nature of the threat they were facing. The information was frustratingly incomplete, consisting mainly of automated status reports and emergency transmissions that had been severely distorted by some form of interference. "The disruption pattern suggests active jamming rather than natural phenomena," she reported. "Something is deliberately interfering with the station's communications and sensor systems, but using methods that don't match any known Alliance technology." "Could it be a previously unknown species?" Grant asked. "Possible, but the sophistication level indicates a civilization with advanced understanding of Alliance technology and communication protocols. Either we're dealing with a species that has been observing us for some time, or—" She paused, considering the implications. "Or we're facing Alliance technology being used by hostile forces," Grant finished. "The possibility of betrayal within the Alliance itself." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Okafor's voice carried a note of tension that immediately commanded Grant's attention. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from Haven 9. The transmission is heavily distorted, but we can make out references to attack and requests for immediate assistance." Grant and his senior staff rushed to the bridge where the main communications array was struggling to process the incoming signal. Static and interference made the transmission nearly unintelligible, but fragments of desperate voices could be heard through the electronic chaos. Under attack by unknown vessels, requesting immediate military assistance, defense systems failing, multiple casualties. The signal cut off abruptly, leaving only empty static on the communication channels. Grant stared at the speakers for a moment, then turned to his navigation officer. "How long until we reach Haven 9? 7 hours at current velocity, sir." Grant considered their options. The Galahad could increase speed by overloading their conventional engines, but doing so would stress systems that were already operating near maximum efficiency. Alternatively, they could begin testing their experimental technologies immediately, potentially arriving at Haven 9 with capabilities that exceeded anything the attacking forces might expect. "All stations prepare for emergency acceleration," Grant ordered. "Engineering. I want maximum power to the engines, without compromising our experimental systems. Tactical, begin preliminary targeting solutions for quantum torpedoes. Science, continue analyzing the distress signal for any additional information about the attacking forces." The bridge crew responded with practiced efficiency, each department working to prepare for combat, while maintaining the operational security that had governed their mission since departure. Grant settled into his command chair, reviewing tactical displays that showed the Galahad's approach vector to Haven 9 and the various scenarios they might encounter upon arrival. "Sir," Okafor reported, "long-range sensors are detecting multiple energy signatures in the Haven 9 system. At least 6 vessels, possibly more, using propulsion technologies that don't match Alliance specifications." "Can you identify their origin?" Grant asked. "Negative, sir. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our database. However, the power levels suggest vessels of significant size and capability." Grant felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. Whatever forces had attacked Haven 9 possessed technology that the Alliance had never encountered, which meant they were dealing with either a completely unknown civilization or Alliance technology that had been significantly modified by hostile forces. "Continue monitoring," he ordered, "and prepare to deploy our gravitational anchor system the moment we drop out of faster-than-light travel. If we're walking into a trap, I want every possible advantage." The remaining hours of their journey passed in tense preparation. The crew ran through combat protocols that many of them had never practiced, while the ship's experimental systems underwent final diagnostic checks that would determine their readiness for actual deployment. Grant spent most of the time reviewing intelligence reports and technical manuals, searching for any information that might help him understand what they would face at Haven 9. When the Galahad finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel, at the edge of the Haven 9 system, the situation was immediately clear. The mining station hung motionless in space, its normally bright illumination reduced to flickering emergency lights. Around it, 6 sleek vessels moved in coordinated patterns, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive silver coloration of Veloker construction. "Sir," Okafor reported with barely controlled anger, "those are Alliance vessels. Velocir interceptors and heavy cruisers attacking one of our own installations." Grant studied the tactical display, noting the precise formations and aggressive maneuvering that characterized Velocir military doctrine. The attacking ships had positioned themselves to maximize their speed advantage, using hit-and-run tactics to overwhelm Haven 9's defenses while avoiding sustained engagement. "Communications, try to raise the Veloker squadron leader," Grant ordered. "I want to know what's happening here." The response came quickly transmitted on standard Alliance military frequencies. The voice was unmistakably Velocer, carrying the characteristic harmonic undertones of their speech patterns. "Human vessel, you are entering a restricted military exercise zone. Withdraw immediately to avoid interference with Alliance training operations." Grant felt his jaw clench with controlled fury. The Velocer were attempting to disguise their attack on Haven 9 as a military exercise, relying on the Galahad's reputation for weakness to discourage any interference. "Velocir Squadron, this is Captain Grant of the Earth vessel Galahad. Haven 9 is a civilian mining facility under Alliance protection. Explain your hostile actions immediately." There was a pause in the transmission, followed by what Grant could only interpret as Veloker laughter. When the response came, it carried a tone of condescending amusement. "Captain Grant, your concern is noted but unnecessary. This facility has been designated for Alliance security evaluation. Your vessel is not equipped to participate in operations of this complexity. We suggest you withdraw to a safe distance and observe proper fleet protocols." The transmission ended, leaving Grant staring at the tactical display, where Haven 9's emergency lights continued to flicker, while Velocore vessels maintained their attack patterns. Whatever political or military considerations had motivated this assault, the Velocore clearly believed that the slow human warship posed no threat to their operations. Sir Banks reported from the weapons station. "The Velocore vessels are maintaining standard attack formations. They're treating us as a non-factor in their tactical planning." "Then they're about to learn a very expensive lesson," Grant replied grimly. "All stations prepare for combat operations. This is not a drill." He activated the ship's internal communication system, addressing the entire crew with words he had been waiting months to speak. "Attention all hands, this is the captain. The time for hiding our capabilities has ended. We are about to engage hostile forces using technologies that represent the cutting edge of human military development. Every department will perform to the best of their abilities, and we will show the galaxy what Earth vessels are truly capable of achieving." The bridge atmosphere transformed as months of frustration and humiliation crystallized into focused determination. The crew of the Galahad had endured countless exercises where they appeared weak and incompetent. Now, they would finally demonstrate the true power that had been hidden beneath their ship's unremarkable exterior. "Engineering, activate the gravitational anchor system," Grant ordered. "Lock our position relative to Haven 9's orbital plane." Torres's voice came through the communication system with barely contained excitement. "Gravitational anchor activated, sir. We are now immune to external gravitational effects and cannot be moved from our current position by any known force." The effect was immediately apparent on the tactical display. The Galahad, which had been drifting slowly through space under conventional propulsion, suddenly became a fixed point in spacetime. Gravitational fields that would normally affect a vessel's trajectory simply ceased to have any impact, making the human ship an immovable object around which the rest of the battle would revolve. "Velociar vessels are reacting to our position change," Okafor reported. "They're attempting to analyze our propulsion systems." "Let them analyze," Grant replied. "Weapons prepare quantum entanglement torpedoes. Target the lead Velocer cruiser." Banks's fingers moved across his control interfaces with practiced precision. "Quantum torpedo armed and ready, sir. Target lock acquired through space-time coordinates, rather than conventional tracking." "Fire!" The torpedo launched from the Galahad's forward bay appeared unremarkable, resembling a standard Alliance munition in size and configuration. However, its behavior immediately defied conventional expectations. Instead of following a ballistic trajectory toward its target, the weapon seemed to slide through space-time itself, its path bending around gravitational fields and energy barriers, as if they simply didn't exist. The lead Velocer cruiser attempted standard evasive maneuvers, accelerating to maximum velocity and deploying defensive countermeasures. None of these precautions had any effect. The quantum torpedo maintained its target lock through the entanglement field, striking the alien vessel's main hull with devastating precision. The explosion that followed was unlike anything the Alliance forces had ever witnessed. Instead of a conventional detonation, the torpedo created a cascade of quantum disruptions that propagated through the target vessel's molecular structure. The Velocer cruiser simply ceased to exist, its matter dispersed across several dimensions simultaneously. "Direct hit," Banks reported with satisfaction. "Target destroyed." The remaining Velocer vessels immediately abandoned their attack on Haven 9, turning their attention to the human warship that had just demonstrated impossible capabilities. Their formation shifted to standard Alliance combat doctrine, with faster interceptors moving to flank the Galahad, while heavier cruisers prepared for direct assault. They're trying to use their speed advantage, Okafor observed. Standard alliance tactics against a slower opponent. Then it's time to show them that speed isn't everything, Grant replied. Engineering prepare the reality core for a limited deployment. Torres's voice carried a note of excitement, mixed with concern. Reality core standing by, sir. Recommend limiting the effect radius to minimize risk of uncontrolled expansion. Understood. Deploy reality field at minimum stable configuration. The effect was subtle at first, visible only as a slight distortion in the space surrounding the Galahad. However, as the reality core reached full operational status, the fundamental physics governing the local area began to change. Velocity became irrelevant as space-time itself resisted rapid movement. Energy weapons lost coherence as electromagnetic constants shifted beyond their design parameters. Even gravity followed altered rules that made conventional maneuvering impossible. The Velosaur interceptors discovered the changed conditions when their high-speed approach suddenly became a sluggish crawl. Engines designed to propel vessels at significant fractions of light speed found themselves struggling to maintain basic maneuvering capability. Weapons that should have struck the human vessel with overwhelming force simply dissipated harmlessly in the altered space-time field. Sir Lee reported from the science station. The reality field is stable and holding at design parameters. Local space-time alterations are affecting all vessels within approximately 500 kilometers of our position. Velosaur vessels are attempting to withdraw from the affected area, Okafor added. But their movement capabilities are severely limited within the field. Grant watched the tactical display as the attacking forces struggled to adapt to conditions that defied everything they understood about space combat. The Velosaur had built their entire military doctrine around speed and agility advantages that became meaningless when the fundamental rules of physics no longer supported rapid movement. Weapons prepare additional quantum torpedoes, Grant ordered. Target the remaining cruisers. However, before Banks could respond, new contacts appeared on the long-range sensors. Dozens of energy signatures materialized at the edge of the system, moving toward Haven 9 at velocities that exceeded even Velosaur capabilities. Sir, Lee called out with alarm in her voice. We have multiple new contacts approaching. Energy patterns are completely unknown, but their speed suggests technology beyond anything in Alliance databases. Grant studied the sensor readings, noting movement characteristics that seemed to ignore gravitational effects and energy conservation principles. Whatever was approaching Haven 9 represented a threat that neither the Alliance nor Earth had previously encountered. Can you identify the new contacts? He asked. Negative, sir. However, their approach vector suggests they're not here to provide assistance, and their numbers are increasing rapidly. The tactical display updated to show over 40 unknown vessels approaching Haven 9, their formation suggesting coordinated military action rather than exploration or diplomacy. The Velosaur forces still struggling within the Galahad's reality field appeared equally surprised by the new arrivals. Sir, came a transmission from the lead Velosaur cruiser. We are receiving communications from the approaching vessels. They identify themselves as Moth Swarm entities and are demanding immediate surrender of all Alliance forces in this system. Grant felt a chill of recognition. Moth Swarm was a designation that had appeared in classified Earth intelligence reports, references to machine intelligences that existed in the spaces between galaxies. According to the fragmentary information available, these entities possessed technology that could manipulate space-time on a scale that made conventional military forces obsolete. All stations prepare for engagement with unknown hostiles, Grant announced. The Velosaur attack on Haven 9 may have been intended to weaken Alliance defenses before the arrival of these Moth Swarm entities. The approaching vessels resolved into visual range, revealing constructions that defied conventional understanding of spacecraft design. Each entity appeared to be a writhing mass of metallic components that shifted and reconfigured continuously their surfaces, reflecting light in patterns that hurt to observe directly. They moved through space without any visible propulsion systems, seeming to slide through dimensions that existed parallel to normal space-time. Sir, Banks reported with growing concern. I'm detecting massive energy buildups within the approaching vessels. Whatever they're planning, it's going to be significant. The first wave of moth swarm entities reached the outer edge of the Galahad's reality field and immediately demonstrated capabilities that exceeded Grant's worst expectations. Instead of being slowed by the altered physics, the machine intelligences seemed to adapt their configurations in real time, reshaping themselves to operate efficiently under the modified conditions. They're not affected by the reality field, Lee observed with scientific fascination mixed with horror. Their technology appears to be based on dynamic adaptation rather than fixed physical principles. Weapons engage at will, Grant ordered. All available firepower. The battle that followed challenged every assumption about space combat that the Alliance had developed over centuries of interstellar warfare. The moth swarm entities moved through space like living mercury, their forms constantly shifting to present optimal attack profiles while avoiding incoming fire. Conventional energy weapons proved largely ineffective against targets that could alter their molecular density to phase through solid matter. The quantum torpedoes performed better, their entanglement targeting systems maintaining locks, even as the entities shifted between dimensions. However, the machine intelligences quickly adapted their defensive strategies, creating localized space-time distortions that disrupted the quantum fields and caused the weapons to lose coherence before impact. Sir Okafor reported as the tactical situation continued to deteriorate. We're being overwhelmed. The moth swarm entities are adapting to our weapons faster than we can target them. Grant watched the display as dozens of alien constructs swarmed around the Galahad, their constantly shifting forms creating a chaotic light show that made conventional targeting nearly impossible. The ship's experimental systems were performing beyond design specifications, but they were facing an enemy that seemed to possess unlimited adaptability. Engineering, Grant called to Torres. Can we expand the reality field to encompass the entire engagement zone? Negative, sir, came the reply. Core temperature is already approaching critical levels. Any significant expansion would risk catastrophic failure. The situation was rapidly becoming desperate. The Galahad's experimental technologies had given them significant advantages against conventional Alliance forces, but the moth swarm entities possessed capabilities that rendered most tactical doctrines obsolete. Grant realized that victory would require thinking beyond traditional military strategies. Science, what can you tell me about the entity's adaptation patterns? He asked Lee. They appear to analyze incoming threats and reconfigure their molecular structure to optimize defensive capabilities, she replied, studying the sensor data that streamed across her displays. However, the adaptation process requires approximately 15 seconds of analysis time before full implementation. 15 seconds, Grant repeated, an idea beginning to form. Weapons, can you coordinate a simultaneous launch of all remaining quantum torpedoes? Affirmative, sir, Banks replied. But if they adapt to the targeting systems, we'll have expended our entire arsenal without achieving significant results. Not if we overwhelm their adaptation capabilities, Grant explained. All remaining torpedoes, maximum dispersion pattern, simultaneous launch on my command. The crew worked frantically to coordinate the complex targeting solution, programming each torpedo to strike a different moth swarm entity at precisely the same moment. The quantum entanglement systems strained under the computational load, but the advanced Earth technology proved capable of maintaining multiple simultaneous target locks. All torpedoes armed and targeted, Banks reported. Firing solution complete. Fire all weapons. The Galahad's remaining 11 quantum torpedoes launched simultaneously, their paths diverging to engage targets throughout the engagement zone. The moth swarm entities immediately began their adaptation process, but the sheer number of simultaneous threats exceeded their analytical capabilities. Several of the machine intelligences successfully modified their defensive configurations, but others were struck before their adaptations could be completed. The explosions that followed created cascading quantum disruptions throughout the local space-time field. The reality core, already operating at maximum capacity, struggled to maintain field coherence as exotic energies propagated through the altered physics of the engagement zone. For a moment, Grant feared that they had triggered exactly the catastrophic failure that Torres had warned against. However, instead of expanding beyond control, the quantum disruptions seemed to interfere with the moth swarm entity's ability to maintain their dynamic configurations. Several of the machine intelligences froze in mid-transformation, their adaptive systems apparently overloaded by the exotic energy patterns. "Oh, Sir," Lee called out with excitement. "The quantum explosions are creating interference patterns that disrupt the entity's molecular reconfiguration systems. They're becoming vulnerable to conventional weapons." All Alliance vessels. Grant broadcast on general communication frequencies. Concentrate fire on entities showing configuration instability. Their adaptive defenses have been temporarily compromised. The remaining Veloker forces, despite their earlier hostility toward the human vessel, immediately responded to Grant's tactical assessment. Their weapon systems, designed for precision strikes against fast-moving targets, proved devastatingly effective against moth swarm entities that could no longer phase through solid matter. The tide of battle shifted rapidly as the machine intelligences found themselves unable to adapt to the combined assault from Alliance forces operating within the Galahad's reality field. One by one, the entities were destroyed by coordinated fire from human and Veloker weapon systems, working in unprecedented cooperation. As the last of the moth swarm entities dissolved into exotic energy patterns, the battlefield fell silent, except for the hum of damaged equipment and the emergency transmissions from Haven 9. Grant looked around the bridge, noting the exhausted but satisfied expressions of his crew. They had not only survived their first real combat engagement, but had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything the Alliance had imagined possible. "Sir," came a transmission from the lead Veloker cruiser. "This is Admiral Vex. I request permission to come aboard your vessel for immediate consultation." Grant considered the request. Admiral Vex was the same Velocer commander who had spent months humiliating the Galahad during Alliance exercises, the architect of countless scenarios designed to demonstrate human inadequacy. Now he was requesting a meeting aboard the ship he had dismissed as worthless. "Permission granted, Admiral," Grant replied. "Shuttle Bay 2 is prepared to receive your craft." The next hour brought a series of conversations that transformed the Alliance's understanding of Earth's military capabilities. Admiral Vex, accompanied by his senior tactical staff, toured the Galahad's experimental systems, while Grant provided carefully edited explanations of their technologies. The gravitational anchor quantum torpedoes and reality core represented advances that could revolutionize space combat. But Grant was careful to emphasize that Earth viewed these innovations as contributions to Alliance security, rather than advantages over Alliance partners. "Captain Grant," Admiral Vex said, as their meeting concluded, "I owe you and your crew a formal apology. My species' emphasis on speed and agility blinded us to the potential of alternative approaches to space combat. Your vessel's performance today has saved not only Haven 9 but potentially the entire Alliance from a threat we were unprepared to face." "Admiral," Grant replied diplomatically, "the Alliance has always been strongest when different species contribute their unique capabilities to common defense. Today's engagement demonstrated that diversity of approach is more valuable than uniformity of doctrine." The Velocer leader nodded his alien features, expressing what Grant interpreted as respect mixed with chagrin. "I will be recommending to the Alliance Council that Earth be granted expanded military research authority and increased resource allocation for experimental programs. The technologies demonstrated today could determine the outcome of future conflicts with entities like the moth swarm." As the Velocer delegation departed, Grant reflected on the implications of their successful mission. The Galahad had proven that slow and methodical could triumph over fast and aggressive, that careful preparation could overcome raw capability, and that unconventional thinking could provide solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Sir Okafor interrupted his thoughts. We're receiving communication from Haven 9. The station reports minimal casualties and expects to resume operations within 48 hours. Excellent news, Grant replied. What's our status for return to Alliance headquarters? Engineering reports that the experimental systems performed within acceptable parameters, Torres announced over the communication system. The reality core requires minor recalibration, but all major components are ready for additional operations. Then, plot a course for home, Grant ordered. I suspect we'll be receiving new mission assignments that better reflect our actual capabilities. As the Galahad began its journey back to Alliance space, Grant stood on the bridge watching the stars shift past the main viewport. The past months of apparent weakness and incompetence had been a necessary deception, allowing Earth to test revolutionary technologies while maintaining operational security. However, the successful defense of Haven 9 marked the end of that phase of their mission. The slow human warship that had been mocked by Alliance forces for its lack of speed and apparent obsolescence had proven that true strength lay not in following conventional wisdom, but in the courage to pursue innovative solutions to complex problems. In a galaxy where speed was considered the ultimate military virtue, Earth had demonstrated that sometimes the tortoise really could defeat the hare. The whispered phrase that had guided their mission from the beginning echoed in Grant's mind as he prepared his official report. Don't measure strength by speed alone. The Alliance was about to learn that lesson in ways that would reshape their understanding of what it meant to be truly powerful in an increasingly dangerous universe. In the days that followed, word of the Galahad's capabilities spread throughout Alliance space. The turtle ship that had been the subject of countless jokes and dismissive comments was suddenly recognized as representing a fundamental advancement in military technology. Earth's patient development of unconventional solutions had produced capabilities that exceeded anything the established powers had imagined possible. The crew of the Galahad found themselves treated with newfound respect as they prepared for their next assignment. The months of enduring mockery and condescension had been transformed into a foundation for future operations that would capitalize on Earth's unique approach to space combat. And in the depths of space where the moth swarm entities had first appeared, long-range sensors detected new energy patterns that suggested their encounter at Haven 9 had been merely the first contact with forces that existed beyond the galaxy's borders. The Alliance would need every innovative technology and unconventional strategy that Earth could provide to face the challenges that lay ahead. The slow human warship had become the fastest path to survival in a universe full of dangerous unknowns. Speed, it turned out, was not always the answer to every problem. Sometimes, the solution required the patience to think differently, the courage to appear weak while growing strong, and the wisdom to understand that true power came not from moving fast, but from being in exactly the right place when it mattered most.